Reporting from Arkham Asylum, this is Gotham Rogues. In this video we count down the 5 Batman comics that should be animated movies. Yeah, that's not the greatest title for a video, but I couldn't think of any other way to word it. Anyway, I think it's great that we've been getting these animated movie adaptations of comic book storylines. It's a way for non-comic readers to experience these stories as well. But with that said, the quality of these movies kinda vary. The Dark Knight Returns adaptation is actually superior to the graphic novel in my opinion. But then we have the Killing Joke movie, which is just absolutely awful. So I'm not sure how well these 5 stories that I've picked would translate to animation. Maybe they'd be great, or perhaps they'd end up like Killing Joke. I don't really know. I tried to be as realistic as I could with this list as well, meaning there were some things I had to take into consideration. Like for example, I skipped stories that are just too obscure and have zero chance of attracting an audience, even though I personally may love these comics. I also had to think of the story's length. I mean, I would really want an animated No Man's Land adaptation, but that would take like 5 or 6 movies to do. Now of course this list is just my opinion, and I'd love to know which stories you want to see adapted, so write them down in the comments. And without further ado, here we go. Number 5. The original ManBat Trilogy. The classic horror tragedy from the early 70s by Frank Robbins and Neil Adams. We're probably never gonna get a live action film based on this story, so why not an animated one instead? Now we have seen this story kind of adapted a few times in animation, like an animated series for example, but it's never been as good as the original, so why not just go straight to the source, don't change anything except for maybe a few small details, and put that on the screen. They also haven't adapted anything from the pre-Crisis era yet. I think the ManBat Trilogy from the early 70s will be a great place to start. The thing is, and this is probably at least partly why they haven't gone to the pre-Crisis stuff, stories from that period aren't exactly made for a movie format. They're too short and the plots aren't on a big enough scale. But there are exceptions, this ManBat saga being one of them. It is also an iconic classic and one of the most revered Batman comics of the Bronze Age. If they do finally start adapting older, pre-Frank Miller stories, then the ManBat Trilogy just feel like one of the likeliest candidates, and I'd personally love it. Number 4. A Lonely Place of Dying. The 1989 arc by Marv Wolfman, Jim Aparo and George Perez that introduced the third Robin, Tim Drake. We've gotten a lot of Robin in these animated movies, but it's mainly just been Damian Wayne. We haven't really gotten diddly squat with the other Robins, unless you count the Red Hood movie. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of the Bat family. I prefer Batman working alone, with the occasional assistance from one of the 3 original Robins, Dick, Jason or Tim. As far as Robin stories goes, this is definitely one of my favorites, as it perfectly explains why Batman kinda needs a Robin around, at least from time to time. Plus, Two-Face is the villain of the story, and you all know he's my favorite. We've gotten very little Two-Face in these movies, actually just his part in the first act of The Dark Knight Returns. A Lonely Place of Dying is one of the better Two-Face stories, not top 5 in my opinion, but still pretty good. It is however the best to deal with the very Silver Agey concept of Harvey's obsession with the number 2. This comic is also quite popular among fans, so it feels likely that it could get adapted. You might have to trim down the Teen Titans stuff though, and maybe even make them into just a cameo. Number 3. Dark Knight Dark City. A classic 3-parter from 1990 by Peter Milligan and Kieran Dwyer. For those who don't know, it's a supernatural story about a demonically possessed Riddler, who as a result is more brutal, murderous and deceptive than usual. The demon uses Enigma and his riddle MO as a means to put Batman in all manner of bizarre situations that are actually parts of a ritual. This is one of my favorite Riddler comics. In fact, I included it in my top 5 best Riddler stories list, my very first video. But not only that, it's also one of my favorite Batman comics period. Riddler is another rogue we haven't seen much in these movies. When it comes to Enigma stories to adapt, I can only really think of 2 that were suitable. This one and Hush. Out of these 2, a 2-part Hush movie seems more likely. Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill have even said they want to do it. But I personally just don't like that story, so I'd much rather see Dark Knight Dark City. I think it could work. It's the right length and the stakes are pretty high in the story. The only problem is, it may not be quite well known enough. Number 2. My Own Worst Enemy. Scott Snyder and John Romita Jr.'s opening arc of the new All-Star Batman title from 2016. I know I had some issues with the big twist at the end of the story, but other than that, I absolutely loved it. The concept is just amazing. Batman dragging Two-Face across the states to cure him, all the while being hunted by an army of colorful rogues. The story also presented some very fascinating ideas about the nature of Harvey's split personality. I'd say that this is probably my favorite Scott Snyder Batman story, and despite his popularity, we haven't really gotten any Snyder stories adapted. Elements of Court of Owls has been used, but no straight-off adaptation has been made. I think that this is probably because most of his stories are too long, so they just don't fit the movie format. At a mere 5 issues, that's a problem My Own Worst Enemy doesn't have though. You might have to trim it down a little bit, but that's no issue, just skip some of the many supervillain cameos. The comic also have a very cinematic nature. It feels like a crazy over-the-top action movie, and it did take inspiration from many movies. So yeah, it's basically a perfect candidate for an adaptation. And now for the comic I want to see adapted the most. Number 1. Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on Serious Earth. The classic, legendary 1989 graphic novel by Grant Morrison and Dave McKean. I both love and dislike this story, and I've tried to review it a few times already, but I'm not quite sure what the hell to say about it. It does present some very fascinating ideas about Batman and some of his rogues, but I also think it's kind of pretentious in places. Like Morrison is trying too hard to tell a bizarre story about a bizarre place filled with bizarre people. I also feel that he's too obsessed with weird symbolism. The thing about an animated movie adaptation though, is that you don't necessarily have to stay 100% true to the source material. I do absolutely love the idea of his story where the Arkham inmates takes over the place and then invites Batman, trying to convince him that he belongs there too. So this is definitely something I want to see in animation and live action as well. I say streamline the story a bit and cut out some of the stuff that's too weird. There are some scenes that I want to be longer though, like the one where Batman is stalked by Scarecrow. That's only 1 page, but Scarecrow looks extremely creepy, so I'd like it to be a much longer sequence. I also love the way Joker and Two-Face are portrayed, so I would want their parts to remain intact. Ease up on the AIDS metaphor with Clayface 3 though, and preferably drop the pedophile hints with Mad Hatter. So there you have it. Those are the 5 Batman comics I like to see as animated movies. I wanted to include Scarecrow-centric and Penguin-centric stories as well, but couldn't really think of any suitable ones. If you can, write them down in the comments. And remember, Arkham Asylum awaits you in the next video.